Oh, there we go. I can bring.
Hi,
Hi, Jean.
finally I got you. Let me
Yeah.
just move. Let me put the sound up. Can you hear me well?
Yes, you're nice and clear, so that's great.
I'm so
um,
pleased to meet you finally.
yes, I know. I feel like we have so much in common. The YouTube thing, I know it seems like anybody who's following my online videos has
Yeah,
followed yours as well. We
right.
definitely operate in the same space, so I
Yeah.
think that's so great.
And our connection with Charlie too. I just got an email from him today.
Ah, oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, I sure enjoy my friendship with him. He just has such a
Yeah,
generous spirit towards all of
yeah,
this, and I think it's contagious.
yeah,
Yeah.
he does good work.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
really great.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I value that. You know, I think what I think about when I was first learning to paint, and I always felt like maybe there would be this time when we'd feel really competitive toward other artists, and you know,
right.
the most of the time it's never that way. We get to
Yeah.
be family, so
And
that's really.
everybody's different. I mean, I follow a lot of people on YouTube
Mhm.
whose work I like, yours and anybody who paints loose,
Mhm.
and and I admire them all, you know. And but we all have a different style. Like I've at some point said, "Well, I like how that person paints. I'm going to try that," but it
Yeah,
never works for you. It
I
doesn't
know
work for
that's
you.
true.
You have your own style.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember like when I first realized that this looseness was what I craved, it was because of artists like Linda Kemp and Jean Haynes, but it wasn't, oh, I want to be them. I saw in them the freedom that I wanted for myself,
Right.
whatever that would look like. So yeah, I think that was the magic. So
Yeah, I followed Jean. I did a couple of Jean Haynes classes now that she's online,
oh, mhm.
but they don't work for me. I admire her
Yeah.
work. Well, I guess I like to paint landscapes rather than florals, and that's because I'm not that great at florals, you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's we all have our little areas that we there are
Yeah.
challenges for us.
Where you feel at home, I think, because I remember saying to a member of my local watercolor community how I found florals easier to paint than landscapes, and she said, "Well, that's because florals are easier." And then I talked to another artist, and she's like, "Oh no," she says, "I find florals very difficult." So,
I found
yeah.
them very difficult too. I mean, difficult in terms of I could paint a realistic flower, but I don't want to paint a realistic flower, and
Mhm.
that's the hardest part. I always say um, I've developed my style has changed over the years, and I like to do semi-abstract landscapes now, and sometimes abstract. But good abstract is very hard to do,
Yeah,
very difficult
yeah,
to do
yeah.
good.
I agree. I think for me, what I've realized is abstract. You need some kind of parameters. A lot of times people think, oh, painting abstract would be easy because you can just paint anything. And it's like, well, that's the problem. If you can paint anything, how do you know what to paint? And so as soon
Right.
as you start kind of establishing some ground rules, you know, here's my composition foundation, or I want it to feel like this emotion, then at least you have something to start with. Yeah.
There's a lot of bad abstracts out there, even from well-known
Uh,
painters, which we
yeah.
won't name. um, and you know, um, I studied with a guy for 4 years, a master watercolorist, and there were six of us in the class, and we we all painted differently. And some people would bring abstracts, and he would always we had always had to bring a painting to the class each week, and he would analyze the paintings for you based on the elements and principles of design. And I learned a lot from him.
Mhm.
And he he analyzed the abstracts the same way. You know, you
Okay.
have to have um, your three three values in unequal quantities. You had to, you know, all these things, and it all applied to abstracts too. You know,
Mhm. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
people, some people who just throw down stuff, not thinking about that, you know.
Yeah. Well, and then there's a delicate balance too, because I think sometimes my strongest work expressively, emotionally, is not my strongest technically. So, you know, maybe the values aren't, maybe I don't have that range of values that would be the most compelling, but the way the painting makes me feel, that to me has to come first. So it's such an interesting tension there.
Yes, it
Because
is.
I maybe I might not get a grade when it comes to design, but yeah, did that mean
It's what you like, it
so?
boils down to what you like, really. And
Really,
it's
experience
nice to have the grounding
yeah,
so that when you look at someone's paintings, you can think about those things.
yeah,
I can still hear Jerry in my head when I paint,
yeah,
don't do this. This is how you compose. This is what you do. But he
yeah.
also agreed that you could break the rules. But he said you have to know what you're doing to break the
Yes,
rules.
that is true. If you don't know the rules are there and you're breaking
Yeah,
them, yeah,
yeah.
out of ignorance or whatever. So that's interesting. Yeah, it's something we talk about a lot because I think often I'm teaching students who have been trying very hard to be technically strong, and they've been so busy focused on technique that they forget to listen to the heart and say what do I like, and
Exactly.
yeah, so that's
Exactly.
something, finding that balance where and I think it's interesting. We've done a really terrible job of introducing this this video, Jean. We launched into the conversation. We'll introduce it later. But
Okay.
I think I see students sometimes they go for the low hanging fruit. So it's like easy wins, and they're painting with a lot of freedom, but they're not thinking a lot about what they want to say. And there's a little bit of fear there too to dig deeper. And then I see students who are working very hard to create things that are technically strong, and they're a little afraid to let go of technique and focus on expression. So there's kind of both sides there.
Right.
And yeah,
Well,
it's that.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh,
Like you, I teach on Teachable, and then students send me their paintings, and sometimes they'll do a perfect thing like I did it. Well, I'm not saying mine's perfect, but
yeah.
it's a complete copy. And then other times you'll get the odd student who changes it up, changes the composition up, does a different color. And I love those because they're thinking for themselves,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we look for, I applaud courage over everything else almost every day. That's what I love to see. So yeah, same thing. And
Yeah.
do you find it's a little bit scary sometimes to be teaching artists to kind of do their own work? This idea that, we are encouraging them rather than copying us. How do you teach someone how to apply these principles to your own work? It's a little harder to teach that, I think.
I don't find that so scary because when I'm demonstrating, I talk about the elements and principles of design, the basic ones, and so I don't find that so scary. But when it comes to if somebody does a really bad painting, I have to think about how I'm going to talk to them, about
Yep.
their painting.
Mhm.
But actually, that doesn't happen that often, I have to say.
Yeah, it's trying. Well, and I think, offering guidance or critique, it's trying to get into their head to read that intention, and because the last thing we want is to derail somebody from the direction they were going and end up with them feeling like they need to, make us approve of their work. That's not the main goal. So yeah.
I've really enjoyed teaching because, and even doing the YouTube videos, although I find that quite taxing coming up. I should do it weekly, and sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't, and I haven't posted in a while. I just, life gets in the way. You just, I don't know. You must find it quite hard because you've got a lot going.
Well, yeah, I do. And I started. I think my first video on YouTube went on in about 2012. I don't know if you were maybe around the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I have a lot of content on there, but I don't post tutorials the way I used to. I feel like, the stuff I have in the past, it's still showing up, in search and so forth. And I don't want to create this mindset where people are just showing up on YouTube for a free meal.
Right.
There's so much that's
Exactly.
there already that I don't need to keep feeding that. If, I want to create an environment that, has them craving more and wanting to grow, but also wanting like a structure and direction, which is something we can offer in our online courses.
Yes.
YouTube's so random. So
yeah, it's a fine line
Mhm.
sometimes.
Yeah. One thing I am doing more with YouTube is I'd like to talk more on there just about artist mindset, because I think that's something that artists need, and they don't always know they need it.
And you find that people are responding to that?
I think so. I don't think they get the same. I don't know if they get the same growth in like traffic but when people connect to that, they really connect to it. And they remember that you were the artist that encouraged them when they felt like giving up. And so,
Right.
that's always my first goal. Whether I'm teaching a painting lesson or a talk about mindset, I'm hoping that whoever's watching is going to come away feeling a little empowered and encouraged where they're at.
Right. I find it quite difficult sometimes to get in the head of beginners, because I think that's mainly who I teach. I don't know if that's the case with you.
Yeah.
And I have to not make it too complicated. And so I always try to simplify every painting that I do if I do a demonstration. And because I remember that when I started out watercolors, it was a total failure, some classes that I took, because I was trying to paint too much detail. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest thing that beginners mistake that beginners make.
Yeah, we want to rush it to the finish. Yeah. Now, you've been painting in watercolor for a long time.
Pardon?
You've been painting in watercolor for a long time.
Yeah, for about, I would say, about 35 years now.
And you've seen your art change over the years, you said?
Yes. When I studied for 4 years here in California with Jerry Stitt, he painted landscapes, and we live in the Bay Area. He was great at painting boats. That was his forte, but his landscapes were great too. And so I ended up finding that landscapes were my thing. I like to paint atmospheric landscapes where I would use lots of glazes to build up a piece. Mm-hmm. And after spending that 4 years with him, I started watching YouTube actually, and I thought, I liked some of those textures, and my style evolved that I like to do these semi-abstract landscapes. I still do atmospheric watercolors, and I like to paint skies. We have great scenery here in the Bay Area, and but I love to paint these semi-abstract landscapes using lots of textures and colors that other than what's in the landscape, and I just find that exciting,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I live I'm on the west side of the country, just like you are, but way up in northern British Columbia. And but the connection I have to nature tells me who I am. It's my roots, and so I'm out walking in nature every day. So there's a lot of identity there, and I'm like you. I love texture, and any colors that are granulating or sedimentary, they're just so fun to play with. Yeah.
Well, there's lots of different ways to get textures, and I experiment all the time, but it's not always successful, but it's fun to explore.
Yeah, I agree. I've been playing with some larger scale paintings, and so then working bigger and using a lot of water. And lately I've been using like some charcoal powder, which is really interesting and very textural. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. I must try that. I've never tried that.
Yeah, well, I go to, you go to the art supply store, and I have all the watercolor stuff. So I usually go to the other parts of the store.
Right.
So there was this jar of charcoal powder, and I'm like, well, I could try that. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So, and I just dumping it on the paper and adding some water to move it around has been pretty fun. So yeah.
Yeah, it's fun experimenting. It's, I just find there's no other medium you can do that with, where you get these happy accidents, and also where the paint takes over, and you just never know what's going to happen.
Well, exactly.
It's an
Yeah.
exciting medium.
Yeah. Yeah, I really see that so much, that you're inviting the paint to do its thing. And you know, you don't see that with oil or acrylic paint, where you put the paint down and it sits there. And if you're going to get a certain color, you have to mix that color. And so, yeah, we get a lot of, yeah, we have to give up some control in order to get all those effects. But the magic,
Right.
it's so worth it. So, yeah.
Well, you get more failures that way in waste watercolor paper, but I still like doing it, you know.
Well, yeah, it's funny because I was joined at a local arts group that was painting, well, probably 2 years ago now, and I was too busy to show up every week, unfortunately. But the one artist that was there was doing a portrait in acrylic, and she couldn't quite get the eyes right on one of the subjects. And so every week when I would come, she would have painted over those eyes and was painting them in again. And I know that for me, if I was to do that, I would just paint the same thing over and over and over again. It seems like I get locked into, you know, copying what's underneath. And she did eventually get an amazing likeness. But as I looked at how she was just layering the paint until she got it right, I thought, in watercolor, we don't get to layer like that.
That's
Our
right.
layers are more like pieces of paper, you know, as we have
Right.
those repeated attempts. It's not that we don't get to, you know, do the kind of corrections she's doing. It's just our corrections take a different form, and we paint it again. And
Right.
yeah, and I enjoy that. I think it's neat because then you get to really see the process. You know, everything she'd done in the past, she just painted over it. You never saw it again. But I get to look at all of those development pieces as they pile up on the studio floor.
I know. It's what I do with my failed paintings. I find one section of it that's okay, and I use them, and I make gift cards, you know, for birthdays and things like that.
Yeah.
For family.
Well, to tell you the truth, if I were to send cards made from every failed painting I did, I would have to do a lot more, spend a lot more money on postage. There's so many, but yeah.
Yeah.
I love seeing that too. There's always something beautiful to you know, notice and to share. So yeah. For sure. Okay, so we're going to be organized now, and we'll move into introducing you. You know, I'm so excited to share you with my Heart-Led Artists community. I know for most of my students in my membership community, they already know about you. They've already taken your tutorial, and every now and then I'll see a student will pop up in the community and say, "I did this from a Jean Lurssen tutorial." And so I'm so pleased that you're here and sharing your knowledge with us, and your love of watercolor, which is what unites us all. And I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing your name right. That's the problem with online friends. It's Lurssen?
Lurssen, yeah.
Yes. And yeah, I think I've been following you on YouTube ever since you first started. We started about the same time. So it's just neat to see that that's evolved into teaching for you. And that you're enjoying that. Personally, I love teaching, and I love seeing other artists who are thriving in that space as well. We're not just bitter teachers who do it because we can't sell paintings, but we really love connecting with students. So thank you for that. You have a lesson for us as well that we're going to add in here, probably about here, and post that. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Again, I thought when I was thinking about what to do, I thought, well, the best thing I could do is try and do a painting where I could show a couple of different techniques for creating textures in your painting. And one of the things I do is I go to the fabric store and I look in the netting department, and I look for things that are interesting, and not the netting that's got the little round holes, you know, but something that's got a nice texture to it. And I found a great, you'll see it in the demonstration, I found a great material that creates really nice textures in landscape. I also used for this demonstration acrylic inks, sepia ink, and other than that, it's all watercolors. And I simplified it again because I basically was just showing the textures. So it's a simplified landscape.
Oh, good. I'm so excited to see it. I always feel like bringing in something new is a great way to invite more creativity, to break me out of a rut, or get me just to feel excited again when I start to feel a little bit stale.
Well, I experiment all the time, and I buy not only from the fabric store, but I go online. I've tried straw to see what kind of texture, because it's got nice, shapes. I've tried that, doesn't work because it's not absorbent. So
Right.
yeah.
Mm.
And I've tried all sorts of things, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
I've had some interesting results.
I wonder if shredded paper would be kind of like straw if you had like something from a paper shredder, because it would absorb a little bit, maybe.
They said the tissue paper. I've watched a lot of demonstrations of tissue paper, but I've tried it and it doesn't work for me.
Yeah, there was one day I felt I was painting and I wanted something really free, and I just wadded up a piece of string and I pressed it into my paint and started slapping it on the paper, and it was so much. So yeah,
Sometimes I use thread,
mhm.
and that's the cotton thread, and that's nicely absorbent. It's quite tricky there, because once it's wet, it all starts sticking together,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you have to sort of work at it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's one thing that happens is we stop feeling like things are really precious when we start experimenting like that. Then it's all part of the process. And
Right,
I love that. Whether it turns out or not, we get to kind of open the door and see what comes in.
right.
Yeah.
No, I love it, and as I said, you can't do that with any other medium except watercolor. I mean, it's such an exciting medium, because you just never know. I often start out a painting, don't even know what I'm going to paint,
Yeah.
and just have a sort of vague idea in my head and the colors that I want to use, and it ends up being something I never even imagined.
Mhm. Yeah, for me, what I try to do whenever I come into the studio is I do a warm up of some kind, because
Yeah,
I know I come into the studio feeling usually goal oriented. I really want to achieve something, and I have to get out of my head and just start to loosen up. So, a warm up where you don't really know what the outcome's going to be, that can trigger so many, exciting possibilities as you lean into that. And it's pretty
yeah.
fun to see a painting evolve just out of, let's see what that first brushstroke does and follow that trail.
Right, right. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention about the demonstration. I usually get so involved in what I'm doing that I don't always pay attention to where the camera is. And right towards about 3/4 of the way through this video, my head got in the way, and I tried editing out most of it, but I had to leave a little bit of it in. So
That has happened to me more times, and I'm usually like, why am I so gray? But yeah,
well, I'm all gray.
well, yeah, it's beautiful. No, we get to recognize, I think, in those moments, when the artist gets fully engaged, there's something exciting about that for the viewer, for the student as well. We're not just teaching by rote, but here we're in the moment, we're focused on the painting. Well, let's go to that lesson right now. And we'll insert it here in the video and let our students watch. And of course, you don't have to paint along with Jean. You can just watch through the lesson right now as we're live, and then come back and watch this again. You can watch this lesson as many times as you want, and I'm sure it'll spark some new insights every time.
So I'm going to do a very simplified landscape for you to show you how I create textures in my imaginary watercolors. I'm going to be using Daler-Rowney sepia ink, and I'm going to use Windsor & Newton aqua green and Daniel Smith quinacridone and burnt orange. Now you know that those two colors, if I mix them too much, I'm going to create mud, so I have to be careful there too. I'm going to spritz the paper at the bottom a little bit, and I'm going to start off with the burnt orange because I really love this color. And you see what happens because I spritz the paper. Getting these interesting textures, and I'm just going to add a little bit of the aqua green, which is an intense color, and I am letting it touch in some areas, and I'm even going to just create a grayish color where I've mixed them here. Now, before this is dry, I want to do something to create some texture here. I go to the fabric store and I look in the netting department and I get these interesting materials. I don't like to get the regular netting with the little round holes. I try to find things like this, which has, I don't know how well you can see this. It's a very uneven design netting, but I use it a lot. And when you cut pieces off, always make sure not to create straight lines. Now, my paper's already, because I've been talking, getting dry, so I have to just wet it again. And what I want to do is lay this down, and I've got all sorts of little offcuts that I use. So there's no sharp edges. And I don't want to do it everywhere. And in this area here, I'm going to take some sepia ink and I'm going to run some sepia ink down this part. And you have to be careful when you're doing sepia ink too, that you don't add too much, because you can get overkill with that. Just taking some granulation medium by Windsor and Newton now, and just adding it to the sepia ink so that it runs down and breaks up and creates interesting textures. Somebody from my YouTube channel said that Windsor and Newton has discontinued this granulation medium, which really surprised me, and I hope it's not true, because I use this a lot. And I need something down here, so maybe I need some sepia ink down here too, just to, because otherwise it looks foreign to the rest of the painting. And maybe I'll even just drop some in here, and let's see. I've got my board at a 45-degree angle so that everything runs down. And same here, I just want to create some interesting textures. Now that looks better. And I like to sort of take the pipette and just create some lines in the piece. I like what's happening here, and I like what's happening here. This ties into that now. Now at this stage, I really just need to let it dry. I don't want to go over the little granules, because they'll move around and then you won't see them. But once they're dry, you can actually paint over acrylic ink and it stays put. So the next stage will be to put some trees in here and some sky area. Now that the painting is dry, before I do the sky and a tree, I'm looking to see if any of this area needs fixing. And when I took off the netting, I love the pattern it gave here, but I'm not that happy with this down here. So what I'm going to do is take a stiff brush. I want to de-emphasize this a bit. I'm just going to wet it, keep dabbing it. See, I'm getting quite a lot of, lifting quite a lot of the color. What I like here is I'm able to actually lift the pattern, and it's creating some texture. Yeah, see, that's much better. That was a little too dominant. I think what I'll do is just add a little more aqua in there, and a little more orange, just very lightly add some more orange. So this is how you can fix areas that didn't work out too well. Now, another thing I'm looking at here is I like the fact that this area is pale. It's a further away hill, but this area, which is close up, because I put a lot of granulation medium in, it's the paint has diluted quite a lot. So just let me spritz this before it gets hard lines. So this probably needs a little more turquoise, but I really want it to be very soft. So I'm just gonna, and I don't want it to be everywhere because I like the patterns here, the blooms basically that were created by water and a mixture of that and the granulation medium. So I just want to add a little more paint and let that run down this area here. And I think that I'm going to let that dry before I decide whether it needs any more. And if it doesn't dry too light, I kind of like where it is right now. I'm going to leave this paler. So now I'm going to do the sky. I'm going to take my 1-inch flat brush and I want to wet the whole sky area. Quite well. I'm going to prop this up again at my 45-degree angle, and I'm using the same aqua as I did in the land area. When you've got it where you want it, you can actually then put it flat. I'm going to add a little bit of warmth with some Windsor & Newton raw sienna. Just want a little bit of warmth in the sky. And I'm avoiding this little area because that's where I want to do a tree. I'm just going to put that flat, and again I have to let this dry before I can do the tree. Okay, So I'm going to put a tree here, and I have to decide now the size of the tree. Because you're looking up this hill, the tree needs to be rather small for the scale of the painting. And so I'm going to again use the same aqua, but I'm going to also use some yellow raw sienna and burnt sienna, and I just want to do a fairly small tree. I like using my hog's hair brush for this, because now I may have done that a little too dark, so I'm going to just dab it a little bit. I think that's okay for the size right now. Just wanted to fix that. I want some variety in the tree. Okay. So I'm going to mix up a brown for the trunk, and I always start off with a thinner trunk because you can always make it wider. Anchor that down. So at this stage, I like to leave this painting for a couple of days because maybe I need to have some bushes here and I want to fix this area here. I could do some grasses here, but I want to think about it first because I may just want to get rid of that. And the way I would get rid of it is with Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. I cannot do without this paint. It's on their site they say it's a watercolor, but it's a very, very thick watercolor, and I could actually totally get rid of all of that, let it dry, and then do whatever I want, paint over it. But for now, I'm going to leave this for a few days and I'm going to think about it. I may want to make the tree just a little bit bigger, but maybe I want to do something here. I don't know yet, and I don't want to rush it. So that's what I'm going to do. One of the things I mentioned about this netting, I purchased it at a place called Joann's Fabric Store, and I believe they are nationwide, so you could try, and I'm not sure if you can order it online. You could see if maybe there's a Joann's Fabric Store in your area. So let's remove the tape, and I always like to have this white border around my paintings. I hope you enjoyed this demonstration. I had a lot of fun doing it, so thanks for watching.
Jean, thank you so much for sharing that lesson with us. Hopefully the one thing it brings to our students is that reminder that experimentation is totally allowed. Your artistic license lets you do whatever you want. And that's the fun part of watercolor, I think.
Yeah. And the most important thing again is don't try to put in too much detail. That's one of the downfalls of when you're beginning, you know, it really is. And
yeah, how much of that do you think is this urgency we have or anxiety we have about how things are going to turn out? I know for me, that was when I was first painting, I wanted to hurry through the painting so I could see if it was going to turn out, which is totally counterintuitive because rushing the painting did not make it better. But yeah, there's a sense of that anxiety there. I feel like when I slow down and just try to really focus on the painting, my painting goes better. And
I agree. I agree with that. I try to rush through sometimes too. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Well, and watercolor, it's not slow drying like oil paint. So we do have that mindset that, ooh, things are going to dry and I got to hurry. But maybe if we're more intentional with our thoughts before we put the brush down, you know, maybe that's a good way of managing that.
And I meant to mention in the video too, you know, you think about things afterwards, you should have said that I always, nearly 95% of the time, work on hot press paper. I just love hot press paper. I find the colors are more vibrant when they dry. You can do fewer layers because of that, and so it keeps the luminosity of the medium. But the painting will work also on cold press paper.
Well, I did want to ask you about your supplies. So you prefer hot press? Is there a brand that you like?
Arches. Funny enough, I like Arches hot press paper, but I don't like their cold press paper. I find it's too absorbent for me because I do a lot of wet in wet, and I find I have to go over it too much. For the cold press paper, I use Saunders Waterford, British paper, and it's lovely. I love that paper.
It's more readily available, I think, now than it used to be. I think
yeah.
For a while, you could hardly get it in Canada at all.
You can get it online now.
Yeah, so that makes it easier. Yeah. You know, I've tried working with hot press, and it just doesn't. I haven't found my comfort zone with it yet. And I think it's one of those things where anytime you try a new material, you have to use it for a while before you start to see the possibilities. But yeah, hot press and I have not found our fit. So,
I feel that way with cold press, you see. It's just, I don't know. And I noticed that we're both left-handed too.
Oh yeah. You know, and there's a part of me that wonders if I should do a channel for wherever all the videos are flipped. So for right-handed people. But,
I know.
To me, it just looks normal. So I don't ever really think about it. But yeah. Tell me about some favorite colors. Do you have anything you're working with the most lately?
You know, when I started out, I was only using Windsor and Newton colors. And I think I wasn't actually even aware of Daniel Smith at that time. This is many, many years ago.
Oh, yeah, same.
And I still, so now I've changed over mostly to Daniel Smith colors because I really like their colors. But there's some Windsor and Newton colors that I cannot do without. And that's their burnt sienna, their raw sienna, the French ultramarine, and the burnt umber. Those are the four that I still buy and indigo. Indigo is one of my favorite colors, but I prefer the indigo from Windsor and Newton.
Oh, well, now I have to try it. When I first started painting, I was using, I think, the Windsor and Newton, like the Cotman brand and Grumbacher. Those were the student grades that were available around here. And I used indigo like every day. It was my go-to dark. And then I went through a phase where I didn't use it much, and now I'm using it again, but I'm using Daniel Smith. So I should compare. That would be interesting. I love the way indigo responds to like blooms and stuff. It's gorgeous. Yeah.
No, I love the indigo. The Windsor and Newton indigo is just terrific. It's I use it a lot for skies, and you can make a nice gray with it for a gray sky, and it's nice. On its own. If you add some black, you can get interesting night skies. It's just a lovely color. And but I like Daniel Smith. I like their magenta, pearl orange, transparent pearl orange. Just trying to think of the colors that I like. Burnt orange, which I used for this painting, and I used one Daniel Smith color for this painting and one Windsor and Newton color. And in fact, it was a new Windsor and Newton color. It was an aqua green. which I really like, actually.
Yeah.
When I was doing, when I do the atmospheric paintings, mostly sort of featuring skies, I like to use more neutral colors rather than bright colors.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm doing the textured landscapes, I like to use the bright colors, you know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it's just I always feel like color, has such a strong influence on mood, and then bringing in a new color can be very exciting and kind of shake things up again. So yeah,
yeah.
I've lately been trying a lot of colors by Schminke, and that's been really fun to experiment with as well. They often granulate quite a bit, so that's been fun.
I love the Daniel Smith granulating colors.
Mm-hmm.
The transparent brown oxide and the transparent yellow oxide. Love those. I did a YouTube demonstration with those, and they turned out quite well.
I don't think I've tried those yet. So yeah, when there's 260 colors or whatever it is, it's hard to have them all. So,
I know. Yeah. I've got drawers. I've got about 4 drawers full of watercolors. And I'm so sad because a lot of them are drying up now because I haven't used them, because I tend to stick to my basic colors that I use,
Mm-hmm.
And they're all things that I bought because I wanted to try at some point,
Yeah, one thing I like to do is if I'm teaching an in-person workshop, I'll often bring my tubes of paint and encourage students to make their own little dot cards so that, they can sample those colors without having to buy all the tubes. And some ways that sometimes that's cleaned out colors that I really don't see myself using enough, and keeping those tubes from aging out. So that's been fun to do. Yeah.
That's good to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, now I have, we've had so much fun talking about watercolor, and I can see your love of the medium here, and your willingness to paint to please yourself, first of all. And that desire to be a loose painter, is really that desire to listen to yourself better. Mm-hmm. I wondered if you had any tips for students who are struggling to loosen up or to create that willingness to kind of evolve without being afraid of what other people might think. I know I have a husband who says my paintings look so blurry now, and they're just not as, he likes the realistic work. And so every day I have to remind myself I'm not painting for him.
Well, the only thing I can say is when I think about talking to students, when I paint, sometimes, as I said, I don't know what's going to happen, but I wouldn't suggest that if you're starting out. What I would suggest is you have a photo of a landscape you like or whatever, and but go and pick some colors that aren't in that photo, and even if it's crazy, there's no such color in the landscape, put that down, and you'll be surprised, what you'll come up with. And paint very loosely, lots of water, lots of water. Yeah. But you're following a design. I think you have to do that when you're beginning. When you've got experience like you and me, I know if something goes wrong, how I can fix it most of the time, But I think when you're starting out, and I even remember when I was studying with Jerry Stitt, and I marveled at the way he, painted. And I was afraid to divert from what, painting this particular landscape, so it was over time, it's experience that allows you to experiment, and have some success.
Because when you end up painting, you're painting your inner landscape, you're painting all of the knowledge that you have, and your vision of the world gets to come out, but you have to build that first. You have to put some inner knowledge in there.
Exactly.
That's why I think about painting in a series, and the better you get to know your subject, that's by painting it multiple times, the more free you feel to experiment.
I think that's why, as a beginner, you need to be a little more structured about what you're going to paint, but don't be structured about what you're going to paint with.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, that's a great way. That's a great way to phrase it. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Have your structure that you lean on, and then let the world be unlimited everywhere else, for sure. Yeah.
And don't even think about, it doesn't have to be a brush. It can be a credit card with some paint on it. It can be, a stick, try different things. Sticks make
Yeah.
nice textures, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's, I feel like it's often the bold choice, the big risk that we take that ends up being the best thing. You know, if we can, you know, allow that, that big daring thing to live on our paper, often that is, yeah, just becomes the most exciting part. So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your online classes and how to find you? You have a website and you teach online as well. So, yeah, tell us about that.
It's watercolors.jeanlurssen.com. I sent you a link. There's about, I think I've got about 6 or 8 courses up there. It's mostly landscapes. There are 2 floral courses, but it's mostly landscapes. And as I said before, I've always simplify the subjects so that it's easy to follow for beginners. The courses, you know, I mean, I have people who are not beginners, but most of the students are beginners, and most of them have had success. There's one course where I paint a fall scene with birch trees and leaves, and I show you how you don't have to paint every little leaf, but you can do it in a very loose way. And I've seen people who can hardly paint who've come out with a great painting from that, you know. So it always makes me feel really good when I see that, you know, that I'm getting across to someone and they feel so proud of themselves, you know.
Yeah, and we build on those successes for sure.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, you have, and the deal with teaching simple, I think we tend to not realize how much goes into a simple landscape, that when your landscape or your scene is simple, you can build detail on that, but you need a strong foundation, and those simple paintings create our strongest foundations to build on. So yeah, they're powerful.
Yeah, I agree. And it's, you know, it's been successful, fortunately. And, you know, I'm pleased with that.
I'm so glad. Yeah, it's been so great to follow you, and I love seeing when a student will come into my community and say, "Oh, I made this painting I'm so excited about from this Jean Lurssen tutorial," and share that with others. And I love, you know, I always love when they're crediting their instructors. I always think we stress that that's important in the community. If you're learning from a tutorial, let the rest of us know who your teacher is, and so we can learn from them too and give them the credit. I love seeing how you free students just to love those beautiful colors and textures and build on those beautiful, simple shapes. So thank you for doing that. We're going to link up Jean's site and her courses in the description below this video so that you'll be able to go and check those out. I noticed you have a course on abstracting the landscape, another great topic for helping an artist loosen up. Just thank you for the way you encourage artists and share your love of watercolor online. I think we get to show up authentically and you know, be advocates for this approach that lets artists feel free to be the artists they were meant to be. And I so appreciate, I love that you're part of that little family of instructors that cares about that. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Angela. I really enjoyed meeting you finally.
Yeah, it's about time, hey?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you, Heartlet artists. We're going to wrap this up. Hopefully you were inspired by Jean's lesson, and I look forward to talking about what we've learned together here in the chat and in the Heartlet artists community. Thank you for watching.